There comes a moment, a deeply silent moment, when something inside you begins to shift, not dramatically, not as a spiritual explosion. Most people never notice when it begins, because externally, nothing changes. You are still sitting, still breathing, still watching, but internally, a subtle question appears, a question almost invisible, and it does not ask about the world, it asks about you. For most of your life, one assumption has remained unquestioned, the assumption that you are your thoughts, that you are the voice inside your head, the voice commenting on everything, analyzing situations, remembering the past, imagining the future, judging, comparing, trying to control, trying to understand who you are. And because this voice never stops, you learned to believe it was you. But notice something now, not as an idea, as direct experience. While you listen to these words, thoughts continue appearing. You may agree, you may doubt, you may remember something personal, you may simply observe, and the strange part is that you did not choose any of those thoughts. They appeared, on their own, without invitation, without effort, without permission. One thought arises, then another, like waves, like breathing, like something happening automatically. And yet, something within you notices all of this happening, something that does not need thoughts to exist, something present even when the mind changes subjects completely. Since childhood, no one taught us to notice this distinction. We learned math, language, social rules, but almost no one taught us how to observe the mind. So we grew believing, thinking equals being. If fear appears, I am anxious. If sadness appears, I am broken. If doubt appears, something is wrong with me. But perhaps thought was never identity. Perhaps thought is only movement. Just as wind moves trees, thoughts move the mind, and something within you remains observing the movement. Modern neuroscience has begun exploring this mystery, and what it reveals is unsettling. Before you consciously decide to move, the brain already started. Before you speak, neural activity has begun. Before you feel you chose, the process was already unfolding. Meaning the sense of conscious choice may arise after the process has started. This changes everything. Because if thoughts appear before awareness, perhaps you are never their author. Consider this carefully. How many thoughts today did you truly choose, and how many simply happened? Memories appear, worries arise, internal dialogues start automatically. The mind functions as a prediction system. It anticipates the future using the past. It does not search for truth, it searches for safety. The brain prefers familiarity, even when familiarity hurts, even when it limits growth, even when it repeats suffering, because predictability has always mattered more for survival than freedom. Perhaps this explains why people change environments, relationships, careers, yet feel life repeating itself. The scenery changes, but the inner experience remains, not because destiny is fixed, but because perception continues filtering reality through old patterns. And then something subtle happens. A small space appears, almost invisible, between thought and the awareness noticing thought. You may be sensing it now, a slight distance, as if you are hearing your own mind for the first time, not fighting it, not trying to silence it, simply observing. And in that moment, something extraordinary begins. Identity loosens from thought, and when that happens, an unavoidable question emerges. If thoughts arise on their own, if emotions appear automatically, if decisions begin before awareness, then, who is aware of all this? Do not answer quickly. The mind will try, but this question does not belong to the mind. It belongs to direct perception. Notice something is here, before the next thought appears. Something that does not need explanation. Something that does not need proof. Something that simply knows it is present. And perhaps, without realizing, you just took your first step beyond the mind. In the next moments, we go deeper, not only into how the mind works, but into the point where awareness begins recognizing itself. There is something curious when you begin observing your own thoughts. At first it feels like a simple attention exercise. You notice one thought appearing, then another, but slowly, something strange happens. You start realizing, thoughts do not ask permission to exist. They appear, on their own, without invitation, without conscious decision. And this raises a silent question. If you did not choose the next thought, who did? Look carefully. Before finishing this sentence, your mind has already started interpreting, agreeing, questioning, comparing with past experiences. Everything happens automatically, and throughout life, we called this automatic process me. But perhaps, that was the first misunderstanding, because there is a profound difference between thinking and noticing thinking. Most people live completely immersed in mental activity, like someone watching a movie, forgetting they are sitting in a theater. The story feels real, emotions feel personal, reactions feel inevitable, but rarely questioned, is the observer of the experience. Modern neuroscience reveals something remarkable. The brain does not simply react to the present, it predicts the future, constantly, creating internal models, simulations, before reality even unfolds, which means much of what you feel does not arise from the present moment, it arises from expectation, old memory, emotional learning, repeated patterns mistaken for identity. Perhaps you never noticed, the mind is fundamentally a recognition system. It does not seek novelty, it seeks familiarity, even when familiarity hurts. Because for the brain, predictability equals safety, and safety has always mattered more than freedom. So something fascinating emerges. Maybe you are not reacting to the world. Maybe you are reacting to what the brain expects to find. This explains repeating situations, similar relationships, recurring emotions, life echoing invisible patterns. But here lies the deeper insight. Repetition does not happen because reality repeats. It happens because perception filters. You do not see only what exists. You see what your mind is prepared to recognize, and suddenly, a new possibility appears. If the mind interprets reality, who notices the interpretation? There is something within you that sees thoughts arise, that notices emotions forming, that observes reactions before action. This something is not rushed, not anxious, not confused. It simply observes, silently, like the sky watching clouds pass. Perhaps for the first time, you are noticing the difference between the moving mind and the awareness that remains. As this realization deepens, a subtle sensation appears, space, between thought and reaction, between emotion and action, between impulse and choice. Inside that space, freedom exists, not the freedom to control thoughts, but the freedom not to be fully driven by them. And here we enter deeper territory. Quantum physics describes multiple possibilities existing before observation, potential states, undefined outcomes. Reality organizes through interaction, through observation, perhaps internally. Thoughts are also possibilities, until attention follows one. Attention becomes direction. What receives attention continues, what does not, dissolves. So the question changes. Not how do I stop thinking, but what in me decides where attention goes. Because awakening may not be silencing the mind, it may be realizing, you were never only the mind. And when this realization begins, something subtle happens. The mind continues speaking, but no longer fills all space. Silence appears behind thought, presence behind experience, and a feeling difficult to describe, as if returning to something that was always here, something prior to identity, prior to memory, prior even to the personal story. And at this point, another question naturally emerges. If you can observe the mind, who is observing? And in the next moments, we move closer to that question, because perhaps the greatest human illusion was never thinking too much, but never looking at the one who thinks. There is an extremely silent moment, so subtle, almost no one notices when it happens. It is not sudden enlightenment, not a dramatic mystical experience, nothing explosive, just a small shift, a moment when you realize you are observing the experience of being alive itself. And when that happens, something begins to change deeply. Throughout life, you were taught to become someone, a name, a story, a personality, a collection of memories. You learned who to be, how to react, what to feel, what to expect from reality. Slowly, this construction started feeling solid, permanent, like you. But notice something now. If you can observe emotions, they cannot be what you are. If you can observe thoughts, they cannot be you either. If you can notice internal change, something within you must remain unchanged, something prior to experience, prior to mental narrative, something present before you even learned your name. As a child, before explanations about the world, before comparison, before expectation, there was already a simple sense of being here, a presence, undefined, unconstructed, just awareness, experiencing life. Perhaps that presence never disappeared. Perhaps it was only covered by layers of thought. Because the human mind continuously creates stories. Stories about the past, stories about the future, stories about identity. And repetition makes stories feel real, but something changes when observation begins. Stories continue but lose weight. Thoughts continue but lose authority. Emotions arise, but no longer define identity completely. Like waves moving across the ocean, they rise, they fall, but the ocean remains. Perhaps you spent life trying to control the waves. without realizing you were always the ocean. Here we enter deeper territory. The mind requires continuity, memory, comparison, psychological time, but awareness requires none of that. Awareness exists only now, and when attention fully rests in the present, something unexpected happens. The sense of self softens. You still think, still act, still live, but there is space, an inner openness, a silent witnessing. This space does not judge, does not resist, does not control, it allows. Ancient traditions describe this in many ways: witness, presence, pure awareness. Modern physics strangely echoes similar ideas. At the most fundamental level, reality appears relational, emerging through observation. What we see depends on how we observe. Perhaps identity works the same way. When observing from the mind, you feel limited, defined, separate. But when observing from awareness, something shifts. Space appears, silence appears, freedom emerges, not because problems vanish, but because the observer is no longer trapped inside them, and a realization begins forming. Perhaps you were never the voice in your head, perhaps you were always the one listening, and if this is true, something extraordinary unfolds. You do not need to fight thoughts, you do not need to erase emotions, you do not need to fix yourself, because what you truly are was never broken. The mind moves, the body feels, life changes, but something within remains untouched, silent, present, observing, and as recognition deepens, life itself changes. External reality may stay the same, but relationship with experience transforms. Automatic reactions slow, impulses soften, control loosens, and an inevitable question arises. If you are not the mind, who is conscious now? Do not answer quickly, let the question remain open. Some questions are not meant to be solved, they are meant to be lived. Perhaps awakening is not finding a new identity, but realizing you are always the space where identity appears. And as this realization deepens, something even more profound begins to emerge. Not only who observes, but what happens when the observer recognizes itself. That is where we are moving next. There comes a point in the inner journey where something unexpected happens. You do not learn something new. You do not gain another belief. You do not find an intellectual answer. You begin losing certainties. We were trained to believe growth means accumulation, more knowledge, more identity, more definition. But awakening works differently. It does not add, it reveals. Reveals what was always present, before explanation, before identity, before the idea of me. Throughout life, the mind acted as narrator, commenting, judging, interpreting, giving meaning to every experience, and gradually, that internal voice felt inseparable from you. But deeper observation changes something. Thoughts appear on their own, memories arise, emotions form, and only afterward, the mind claims ownership. But if the thought appeared first, who noticed it? This is where identity begins to soften. The familiar mind once felt safe, even when it created suffering, because familiarity feels secure. Even when limiting, then a silent fear appears. If I am not my thoughts, who am I? The mind tries to answer quickly. New labels, new explanations, but awareness prefers silence. Because within silence, something subtle reveals itself. You begin noticing spaces between thoughts, tiny gaps, moments without narrative, pure presence. These gaps always existed. They were simply hidden beneath mental noise, and resting attention there, a profound discovery emerges. You do not create awareness. Awareness is already here, before thought, during thought, after thought. The mind moves. Awareness contains movement, like the sky and clouds. Clouds change, storms pass, but the sky never becomes the storm. Perhaps you are closer to the sky than to the clouds, and this changes everything. Psychological suffering often arises from identification. A sad thought gives I am sad. An anxious thought gives something is wrong with me. But mature observation reveals, thoughts are events, not identity. Emotions are movements, not definitions. Experience flows. Awareness remains. Life externally may remain unchanged, yet internally there is more space, more calm, more breath. Reaction slows. Silence appears before response. And inside that interval, freedom emerges. Not freedom to control everything, but freedom from automatic reaction. Neuroscience observes a similar phenomenon between stimulus and response. There is an invisible space. Most people never notice it. They live reacting automatically, but awakened awareness perceives the gap. And inside that gap, possibility lives. Perhaps freedom was never unlimited choice. Perhaps freedom is noticing before reacting. The mind continues functioning, planning, protecting, organizing, but no longer dominates experience. Presence quietly emerges. You begin living life instead of thinking about life. Sounds feel clearer. Time slows. Simple moments deepen because attention returns to the present. The mind lived in past and future, but awareness lives only now, and something relaxes deeply. You are no longer only the character. You are also the space where the story unfolds. A realization begins forming. You do not need to become someone new. You simply stop holding tightly to identity. What you truly are requires no defense, no maintenance, no proof. It simply is, silent, present, alive. And then a deeper question arises. If awareness observes the mind, who observes awareness? Is there a final observer, or only awareness recognizing itself? Do not answer. Stay with the question. Some questions expand being, not thinking. Perhaps awakening is not discovering who you are, but realizing what has always been here, waiting only to be recognized. And as this recognition deepens, reality itself begins to feel different. That is the step we are entering next. There is a very specific moment in human experience, so subtle, that almost no one notices when it happens. Nothing changes outside. The world remains the same. Sounds continue, thoughts continue, life continues. But something inside you shifts position. For the first time, you step slightly back from the mind, and in that subtle movement, a new perception emerges. For most of your life, you believed you were inside the mind. You believed you were the voice, the reaction, the emotion, the story. Now something different happens. You begin noticing the mind operating. And that small shift changes everything, because observing is not the same as being. A thought appears, a memory, a worry, for years. Identity formed instantly. I am worried, this is who I am, but now, a space appears. You see the thought before believing it, and a silent question emerges. If I can observe thought, how can I be the thought? The question opens something deeper. The mind presents content. You assume authorship. But what happens when authorship fades? Thoughts continue, yet identity loosens. At first this feels unfamiliar, even unstable, because the mind provided psychological continuity. It told you who you were. Now that continuity softens. Not as loss, but expansion. The mind continues speaking, but you are no longer fully inside the conversation. There is silence behind it. Presence, space, and for the first time, you realize awareness is not something you do, it is what you are, always was before language, before identity. Moments of deep peace appear not when problems end, but when mental noise slows. You may have experienced this, watching the ocean, the sky, a quiet landscape when narrative disappears. No commentary, no judgment, only perception. You do not disappear, you feel more alive, because awareness does not depend on mind. Mind depends on awareness. This realization transforms experience. Thoughts stop being commands. They become passing events, waves moving across consciousness. The mind travels through past and future. Awareness remains here, now, always present. Fear softens, because suffering often comes from trying to control thoughts. But thoughts arise spontaneously. Perhaps the problem was never thinking, but believing every thought. As this deepens, the nervous system relaxes. Time slows, reactions soften. You live experience without being consumed by it. The greatest shift occurs. You stop trying to fix the mind, and begin observing it. And surprisingly, silence grows. Not empty silence, living silence, intelligent presence. Perhaps awakening is not discovering something new, but recognizing what has always been looking through your eyes. And when this stabilizes, reality itself feels different. Life becomes a flow rather than a problem, and a deeper question arises. If you are not the mind, who is conscious right now, do not answer. Let the question remain. Some questions awaken being itself, and perhaps for the first time, you are beginning to notice what has always been aware, and this recognition is only beginning. There is a moment, and almost no one notices when it happens. Nothing dramatic occurs, no sound, no revelation, no external change. But internally something shifts, and if you are still watching this video, there is a strong possibility that this moment is happening to you right now. Because awareness does not arrive like information, it arrives like silence. Think about the last few minutes. You have been listening, observing, reflecting, but something subtle may have begun to change. Your thoughts slowed, your breathing softened, your attention stopped, jumping from idea to idea, and maybe, without trying, you became quieter inside. This is not coincidence. This is not relaxation. This is awareness, beginning to recognize itself. Most people believe awakening is an event, a breakthrough, a realization, a powerful emotional experience. But real awakening rarely feels intense. It feels natural, almost ordinary, so ordinary that the mind overlooks it, because awakening is not something new appearing, it is something false, becoming unnecessary. Right now, notice something. You are listening to these words, but at the same time, you are aware that you are listening. There is hearing, and there is awareness of hearing. Which one are you? For years, the mind convinced you that you were the voice thinking inside your head, the narrator, the commentator, the internal storyteller. But look carefully. Thoughts appear, they stay briefly, then they disappear, just like waves touching the shore. If thoughts come and go, how could they be you? And here is where something extraordinary begins. Because once this question becomes real, the relationship with experience changes forever. You stop trying to control thoughts. You stop fighting emotions. You stop identifying with every mental movement, and instead, you begin to witness, not as an effort, but as a natural state. Many traditions describe this moment differently. In philosophy, it is called metacognition. In meditation, it is called pure awareness. In neuroscience, it appears when activity decreases in the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for self-referential thinking, and in quantum observation models, it resembles the moment when observation changes the behavior of a system. The observer alters reality, not by force, but by presence. Something similar begins happening internally. The moment awareness observes thought, thought loses authority. You may start noticing small changes. You react less automatically. Silence becomes comfortable. You feel less urgency to solve yourself. Moments feel wider. Time feels softer. Life feels less heavy. Nothing outside changed. Yet experience feels different. Why? Because identification shifted. Before thoughts happened to you, now thoughts happen in awareness, and that distinction changes everything. Notice this carefully right now. Try to find the exact location of the observer. Where is it? Behind the eyes, inside the head, in the chest, in the body. The more you look, the less precise it becomes. Awareness has no clear boundary. It does not have shape. It does not have weight. It does not even feel personal. And this realization can feel strangely peaceful, because if awareness has no rigid center, then perhaps you were never confined to the story you believed you were. Many people begin to sense a quiet freedom here. Not freedom from life, but freedom inside life. You still think, you still feel, you still act, but something fundamental changes. Experience is no longer happening to a fragile identity. It is unfolding within awareness itself, and when this happens, a subtle compassion appears, toward yourself, toward others, toward existence. Because you start seeing that everyone is living inside thoughts they believe are absolute. Everyone is reacting to internal narratives. Everyone is searching for peace in objects, achievements, validation, while the peace they seek exists underneath thinking itself. This is why silence feels different now, not empty, but alive. You may even notice something unexpected. You are not trying to understand this video anymore. You are experiencing it. That is the shift. That is the invisible turning point. The moment when awareness stops chasing meaning, and simply becomes present. And from here forward, life begins to feel less like a problem to solve, and more like something to witness. But something even deeper is about to be revealed, because recognizing awareness is only the beginning. The next realization changes how reality itself is perceived, and very few people ever arrive there consciously. Take a slow breath, stay here, because what comes next is where perception itself transforms. Something subtle begins to happen after awareness recognizes itself at first. It is almost impossible to describe. Nothing outside changes, the same room, the same sounds, the same world, and yet experience feels different. You may notice it as a strange clarity, a quiet distance between you and your thoughts, a softness in perception, as if reality itself became slightly wider. Most people spend their entire lives inside automatic perception. They see, but do not notice seeing. They think, but never observe thinking. They live, without realizing that experience is being continuously interpreted by the mind. But once awareness turns toward itself, perception stops being automatic, and something extraordinary happens. You begin to see reality before interpretation. Look around you right now, not conceptually, not analytically, just look. Colors appear, shapes appear, light moves, sound emerges, sensation exists. All of this happens instantly, before words, before meaning, before identity. Reality is appearing directly in awareness, and for the first time, you may begin to sense that experience is not happening outside you. It is happening within awareness itself. This realization is deeply unsettling for the thinking mind. because the mind survives through separation. It creates subject and object, observer and observed, self and world. But awareness does not divide reality this way. In awareness, there is only experience happening. Quantum physics touches this mystery in its own language. At the subatomic level, particles do not behave as fixed objects. They exist as probabilities, possibilities, potential states. Only when observed does a specific reality emerge. Without observation, there is no defined outcome. This does not mean consciousness magically controls the universe, but it reveals something profound. Observation participates in reality. Now bring this insight inward. If observation shapes how physical reality appears, what happens when awareness observes experience without resistance? Something remarkable begins. Life feels less solid, not unreal, but fluid, dynamic, alive. Situations that once felt heavy begin to loosen, emotions arise, and pass more easily, thoughts lose their urgency. Even time feels different. Moments stretch, presence deepens. You start realizing that suffering was never only caused by events. It was created by unconscious identification, with mental interpretation, and when identification softens, experience breathes again. You are still living the same life, but you are no longer trapped inside it. Many people describe this stage as feeling more real than anything before. Colors seem richer, silence feels meaningful, nature feels intimate, even ordinary moments carry quiet depth. Walking becomes meditation, listening becomes connection, breathing becomes enough. Why does this happen? Because awareness stops filtering reality through constant psychological narration. The mental noise decreases, and underneath that noise, there was always a profound stillness. That stillness was never absent. It was only unnoticed. Imagine watching waves on the ocean. For years, you believed you were one wave, struggling, rising, falling, fearing disappearance. But now, you begin to sense the ocean itself. The movement continues, but fear decreases, because the ocean is not threatened by the movement of waves. In the same way, awareness is not threatened by thoughts, not threatened by emotions, not threatened by change. And this recognition brings an unexpected peace, not a forced calm, not emotional suppression, but a natural relaxation into existence. You may begin to notice that reactions slow down. Before responding to something, there is space, a pause, a silent openness, and inside that space, freedom appears. Freedom not as control, but as not compulsion. You no longer need every experience to confirm who you are, because identity itself feels lighter, less rigid, more transparent. And then a deeper question arises. If awareness is present before every thought, before every perception, before every identity, then what has truly been living your life all along? Was it the mind? Or was the mind simply an activity appearing within awareness? This question does not demand an answer. It invites direct seeing. Right now, notice the awareness reading these words. It does not struggle, it does not effort, it simply knows, quietly, effortlessly, always here, and perhaps for the first time. You begin to sense that awareness was never something you needed to achieve. It was the background of every experience you have ever had, every memory, every emotion, every moment of your life unfolded within it. Nothing new was added, only confusion is dissolving. And when confusion fades, reality feels intimate again, not distant, not threatening, but deeply connected. You are not separate from experience. You are the space in which experience appears, and this realization prepares the final transition. Because once awareness is recognized, something inevitable begins. The observer itself awakens, and when that happens, the way reality organizes itself seems to change. Stay here, because the next moment is where perception and reality meet. There comes a subtle moment, almost invisible, when you realize something inside has changed. Nothing happened outside, no dramatic event, no sudden revelation, and yet, the way you are looking at yourself is no longer the same. Perhaps during this video, you began noticing something unusual. Thoughts continued appearing, memories continued arising, emotions still moved through the body, but something silent appeared between them, a space, a gentle distance, as if you were watching the mind operate, without being completely inside it. And this is one of the deepest discoveries a human being can make, because for most of life, we believe we are what we think. If a thought says I'm not enough, we believe it. If a thought predicts fear, we feel it as truth. If the mind tells stories, we live inside them. But now, perhaps you are noticing something different. Thoughts arise, yet something within you remains untouched. Something observes, something does not react immediately. Something simply is. And when this realization begins, a silent transformation unfolds. You stop trying to control the mind and start recognizing it. The mind was never the problem. Identification was. Thoughts are movement. Awareness is the space where movement happens. And maybe, for the first time, you are sensing that space, not as philosophy, not as spirituality, but as direct experience. Notice now, right before the next thought appears, there is silence, a nearly invisible gap, an open field. That space has always been here, before every emotion, before every reaction, before every decision. And something profound becomes clear. You were never trapped inside the mind. You simply forgot to look from where it arises. The mind speaks loudly. Awareness does not need to speak, it only sees. And when this becomes clear, something relaxes deeply. The need to understand everything softens. The urgency to control the future fades. The weight of identity loosens. Because the observer does not need to defend a story. Perhaps awakening is not gaining something new, but releasing what was never yours to carry. Less effort, less inner conflict, more presence, more clarity, more living silence. And then an inevitable question emerges. If you are not your thoughts, if you can observe them, if awareness exists before thinking, then, who is aware right now? Do not answer quickly. Do not turn this into a concept. Simply feel the question. Some questions exist not to be answered, but to open perception. Maybe you are beginning to see. The mind was never the center of experience. It was only a tool, useful, creative, powerful, but not what you are. And when this understanding deepens, reality begins to change effortlessly. Not because the external world changed, but because the observer changed. And this naturally leads us to the next step. In the next video, we explore the moment when perception crosses the final identification, and you begin recognizing what has always been present beyond the mind. The next episode is called, When the Observer Awakens, Reality Changes. Because transformation may never have been about changing the world, but recognizing who was looking at it all along. If something in this video resonated with you, write one word in the comments. A word describing your current state. Silence, clarity, presence, awareness. Do not overthink, just notice, and write. If this space speaks to you, subscribe to the channel. This is not only a video, it is a journey unfolding layer by layer. Thank you for being here. Much light on your path. And when you are ready, the next step is already waiting.